What's up, you guys? In today's video, it's going to be a little bit different than normal. I'm going to walk you through my upbringing, my story, and kind of show you how I got from there to where I am today. There's going to be a lot of stuff in this video that you don't know about me, so check this out. Alright guys, well welcome back to the channel. This video is just a little bit different than normal. This isn't as woodworking or handmade driven as most of our videos, but in today's video I want to give you a little bit more of a glimpse into my life and my upbringing and where I came from and how I kind of got from there to where I'm at today. So just FYI, we have our podcast, Handmade Business Secrets, and episode 1 of that podcast is kind of our story getting into woodworking, but I want to throw it back, way back to the beginning in today's video and talk about kind of my upbringing and what we walked through when I was younger. And so I am the second born of my parents, and I grew up in a town in rural Arkansas called Hartman, Arkansas. I think the population right now in Hartman, Arkansas is about 596 people, if I remember what the sign says when you drive into the town. In Hartman, Arkansas, it was pole. I mean, so poor that you couldn't even afford the R at the end of the word. I mean, we grew up in a house that was about 550 or 600 square feet was how big our house was. I didn't starve. We never lacked. We never, didn't have food, or we never had our electricity turned off or anything like that. But my parents didn't make good money. They made well below the median income in the United States. But we grew up in a really simple home, never starved, but didn't ever live in luxury or have anything nice either. Barely getting by. And like I mentioned, I was the second born, and my older brother, he was born 2.5 years before me, and he developed normally, around 1.5 years old, started walking. By the time he was about 2.5, he lost his ability to walk. And my parents really didn't know what was going on, didn't know why that was happening. And they took him to the doctor, and doctors ran all these tests, couldn't figure it out, took him to a specialist, continued to try to figure out what was going on with my brother. They discovered that he had a really rare condition called Lee's disease. Essentially what happens is that your body starts to break down. Inside of every cell that we have these little things called mitochondria that produce energy. Well, his stopped producing energy. So what happened was that he lost his ability to walk. He lost his ability to swallow and process food. All I remember in my childhood was having a brother that was in a wheelchair. There was a feeding tube in a port in his belly button, and that's how we had to feed him because he couldn't eat. He couldn't process food normally. And my brother, I'll tell you, he was one of the sweetest kids ever. Just a great kid. But really had a lot of health complications, really went through a lot. My parents obviously didn't have any money, so they would do a lot of fundraisers to try to do research, and they traveled all over the country to California and Florida and all these research centers trying to find a cure for my brother. And I just remember that was really during the early years of my life. And I remember one day my dad and I, every once in a while, my dad would do something special with my brother, he'd do something special with me, and we lived out in the country, and so we would drive to the bottoms is what we called it. And it was just farmland that had a levee that was kind of like there was a river that ran around the farmland, and you could drive on the levee. And so I remember one day my dad was like, hey, you want to go for a drive? And so yeah, and we went and we drove on the levee, and we always had in-home nurses and stuff too for my brother because he required so much care. We went for a drive on the levee, and I remember getting home and the house just being in panic and me not really understanding what was going on. But I remember my dad sitting me down on the couch and grabbing me by the shoulders and basically saying, whatever you do, don't come into your bedroom. So I remember being a 4-year-old. This was 4 days before my 5th birthday, so I was almost 5. But I remember sitting there on the couch with the door closed to my room and listening to the nurse, my mom, and my dad experience my brother passing away in my room. He was 7. From that point on, we really struggled as a family. For a really long time. In that happening, my mom drew a lot closer to God in her relationship with God, and my dad drew further away, so he was angry with God. So I remember growing up and going to church and being really involved in the church, my mom singing all the time, but my dad really didn't want anything to do with it. And it really wore on their relationship. I can't imagine, I have 3 kids of my own now, and I can't imagine losing one of my children. It's a crazy thought to have that, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense why that would happen. And but that was really the beginning of my story. And my parents weren't go-getters. They worked normal jobs. They really didn't have any financial literacy, really understanding how to make their money work for them, or to save or invest money or do any of those things. And so I really didn't have anybody to teach me that. And the deal was, there wasn't really anybody in my town. I went to a really small school. There really wasn't anybody that could teach me those things. And so honestly, it wasn't until I was out of college, I was like 22 years old, that I first decided that I wanted to do well financially, that I wanted to pursue business. It's so funny because I remember being a kid and being like, I think I want to own a business one day, but had no context for what that meant. And so I say all this to say, I don't say all this, for your sympathies, to give you a big long sob story. I say all this to give you context for my life and where I've come from and the challenges that I've faced along the way. To say that it doesn't really matter what you come out of or what you've come from, that God is always rewriting your story, that you can always pick a different path. Your life doesn't have to look the same way that your parents looked or that your grandparents looked, that you can make your own decisions and you can choose that no matter what has happened to me, I can use that as a crutch for why I am the way that I am or why I struggle with what I struggle with, or you can use it as fuel to say I'm not going to struggle with the things that my parents struggled with, to have to walk down the same road that they walked down. I'm going to use this pain in my life as fuel to become somebody that helps people, that cares about people, that has an education around things that matter, and that raises a family well, and that has a healthy marriage. Life is so multifaceted, right? You've got your relationships, you have your own personal health and well-being, physical, spiritual, emotional. You have your financial life, your occupational life. Life is so multidimensional. But I know this, you get to make decisions for your own life. Are there things that happen to us that are outside of our control? Yes. Was it outside of my control that my brother passed away when he was 7 and I was almost 5? Absolutely, that was outside of my control. Was it outside of my control what family I was born into? Yes. Was it outside of my control the house that I grew up in? Yes. But all of those things became fuel for me to love my family well, to take care of my kids, to do well financially, and to make a difference in my life. A lot of you may or may not know, but I'm a full-time pastor. That's what I do full-time. I do that 40 hours a week plus, and that's what I feel called to do, for sure. At least in this season of my life, I continually feel called to it. And I know that our lives are made for more than just dealing with the same old things, the same old struggles that our parents dealt with, or just pursuing money all the time. Your life has purpose, it has meaning, it has value, and I wanted to just spend a little bit of time in this video giving you a glimpse into my background, where I come from, and the fact that it doesn't matter what you come from, God is always rewriting your story. So I'll wrap this video up, but I wanted to give you some context into who I am, the background that I come from, and ultimately the fact that you are in control of the story that you tell yourself, and the story that you live can either make you or break you, but you get to choose. So with that being said, guys, hope this was encouraging to you. If so, let me know in the comments below. I love you guys. I'll see you in the next one.